Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. And this week, we're going to be catching up on what's going on in Ukraine. There are not necessarily any topics connected to Ukraine that are setting the internet on fire this week, which is a first. So, we're just going to catch up at where we are at and what's next. And helping us today with that will be Denis Davidov.
Hello, my friends. Welcome. My name is Dennis, and you know me from my Dennis Davidov channel, probably. I'm analytic of the war in Ukraine and also used to be an airline pilot before the war had started. I'm Ukrainian myself. Yula, thank you for having me today in your program.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining. Always a pleasure. I guess today I don't necessarily have a specific topic, but as we talked about before we started this recording, I sort of want to do like a rundown on where we are at and what it feels like in terms of like all the international chatter, chatter between like Ukrainian specialists and analysts in terms of like what's happening, because obviously there have been a lot of changes internationally in Ukraine because there is the Israel-Iran situation that Trump and America are clearly focusing a lot more on, and definitely using a bit of an excuse to drop Ukraine and give us less and less and drain that situation. So what are you hearing? Like, what is your sort of general opinion on how things are lately?
Yeah, you're correct. The events in the Middle East, they little bit put the focus aside. I also in my videos, in my analysis, I also focused on those events, but in a way they're interconnected. I think how the situation developed there recently is actually good, brings more good things for Ukraine. It's interconnected, our world is connected, the same players, I mean, United States, Russia, Iran supplies weapons and spare parts to Russia. Now Russia is more like isolated now with their Shahed drone productions. They can do it autonomously without some of the Iranian spare parts. So they're more independent with that. But in general, like the main plus for what I see that American policy, maybe Donald Trump's team, Donald Trump himself, they're shifting a little from pro-Russian influence that was there in the White House. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, they were really following pro-Russian narratives, and Trump, he openly mocked them in his social media and through social, so it's a good sign, I think, in general for Ukraine. We're also going to speak about the NATO visit. I think today Donald Trump was the newsmaker yesterday with his visit on NATO summit. Also, the positive outcome, I think that the fuel prices, they didn't rise. They dropped even to the same level as it was before the Middle East conflict. I was too much afraid about the oil prices to skyrocket by 50%, 100%, because many experts predicted it. But it could have happened only if Iran blocked those Hormuz Straits and the way out from the Red Sea. But it didn't happen because the main customer for the oil is China, and China cooperates in a way with Iran. So there were some of the threats from Iran, but they didn't do it actually. One more good outcome that Putin wanted to be like a mediator between America and Iran, maybe Israel as well. But Donald Trump also openly in his social media said, I need a mediator with you. So he said, like, I need someone to finish what you are doing. And it's understandable, I think, now even for Donald, that Putin doesn't want to stop this war. So yesterday on the NATO summit, there was again the question about 24 hours. You promised to stop in 24 hours. It's been 5 months since the war is, since you became the president, and the war continues. And Donald Trump said, oh, it is tougher than many expected. I would say not many, but he expected it to be like an easy solution that he can go and resolve the conflict very, very soon. I mean, the war, he thought that Biden's administration was incompetent, but basically he has the same tools as the previous White House administration, nothing more, nothing less. United States cannot influence Russia and Putin to stop the war. I mean, they can raise the sanctions, which would act in a few years fully. The only prompt action they can actually do is to support Ukraine. That's the main issue we still have with Donald Trump. And yesterday, Rubio Rubio, the Secretary of the United States of America, said that they don't want to strengthen sanctions on Russia, even though there is the ready-to-go project now in Senate, and vast majority of senators are eagerly willing to vote for it, but still there is no green light from the White House. And that's the biggest downside, I would say. Yeah, sanctions will not destroy Russia's military right away, but brick by brick, little by little, I think they may harm the Russian economy in the future. Yeah, despite what Russia now has, I mean, open markets out there in India, in China, still sanctions harm a lot, especially secondary sanctions, which are there in this project of Senate.
So what I was trying to say is that I think with Donald Trump in particular, I think he thought he can end the war because he thought Putin respects him.
Yeah.
And he thought he could just tell him not to do something and Putin would listen. And then obviously that's not the case, because we all know it's not the case. It's interesting that you see so many positives in this situation, because I feel like I've been talking to a lot of experts lately, and all of them kind of say, like, obviously Ukraine will win this war. There is no other way, right? But at what price? In a sense where like they think something like very, very horrendous beyond the horrors that have been happening needs to happen for like Europe to wake up and actually start doing things. There was this journalist from Ukraine that asked Donald Trump a question the other day, and she asked if he would sell Patriot systems to Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Felt like he was trying to do a gotcha moment with her, where he was like, "Oh, do you live in Ukraine?" And she was like, "Well, no, I live in Poland, but my husband lives in Ukraine." And he was like, "Oh, is he a soldier?" And she was like, "Yeah, well, he is a soldier. He's actually at the front and he's fighting." And it felt like, he wanted her to say that he isn't, and that she doesn't live in Ukraine, so he could like kind of deflect the question. But then all of her answers were basically what she should have answered in a sense. And so he was a little cornered with that, because in a sense, there is no reason for him to not sell Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. There's absolutely no reason for him not to do that. It's not like Ukraine at this point is asking to donate them. We're asking to buy them, and he consistently keeps denying that, especially in this situation in which like there have been many more drone and missile attacks on Kyiv and other cities recently. And as someone who lives in Kyiv, I used to not go to the bomb shelter when Shaheds were flying, which is irresponsible, and I don't recommend, as in like, don't do this at home. I don't recommend this to anyone who's who might be watching this who is in Ukraine. But in general, I felt safe enough with air defense to take down Shaheds before they reach my particular neighborhood, because I'm pretty central. And then lately, I don't feel safe like that anymore, because there are two things. They're flying straight into buildings, and they're going much lower than they used to. And the latest stat really terrified me, because normally when they post statistics, it's like, oh, there were 400 drones and 385 of them were taken down. And then there were 11 missiles and 9 were taken down, right? This stat was something along the line of 16 missiles and 7 were taken down. And then the recent stat was like much lower than normal. And then the drones were something along the lines of over 300 drones and 170 were taken down. So that's a huge jump in how much air defense missed. So at this point, Russia is doing more, and you also can rely on air defense less. So it's very strange that for someone in the US to be so opposed to selling Ukraine defense systems, right? So I don't know if it's about the pro-Russian sentiment here, or about the fact that Donald Trump this is not a conflict that he cares about. It's not something that interests him personally.
Yeah, the problem here that Donald Trump still says that United States plays a mediation role in this war, which is absolute nonsense, because the United States continue support of Ukraine with military. Yeah, those are the previous packages which were agreed under Joe Biden's administration, but still, weapons have been sent and are being sent to Ukraine. So by definition, United States is not a mediator country and cannot possibly be it. Donald Trump, maybe he thinks differently. It's very hard to actually say why he's not willing to sell even Patriot systems to Ukraine. The other thing that Patriots, like every missile, costs roughly 3 million, something like that, maybe a little less now. And wasting those missiles on every Shahid, it will just deplete all of the stockpiles of missiles, maybe even around the world. If Russia sends like 200, 300 drones per night to hit Ukraine. So Ukraine should come with other tools. I was listening to Zelensky's recent speech. He wants to introduce some sort of the anti-drone systems, like FPV drones, which are being used actively on the front lines, shutting down the surveillance drones like Zala or Lan, so they could be used against Shahids. But Russia again changed their tactics. They now send their Shahid drones or Giran 2 drones up to 3 kilometers of the altitude, and then they dive down, as you say, to mostly civilian infrastructure. They also equip with their drones with new systems, like for example NVIDIA Jetson computers. Those are very powerful computers used in robotic techniques, in robotics, used for artificial intelligence. I do not say that Shahid drones are controlled by or operated by artificial intelligence. No, not at this stage, but they have thermal cameras, they have usual cameras, they have those powerful computers. It means that probably Shahid drone operators are there in Russia controlling those drones. It has never been like that before. That's why maybe they're more effective, because they may control those drones live. Also, as some of the Ukrainian volunteers, including Sternenko, they say that maybe some of the restrictions for SIM card service should be applied, like for mobile network, because they also send the signals to control via mobile network that we use. At least at some areas by the time of the air sirens alarm. So there could be some of the restrictions for Russians to not be able to control their drones, because it's one of the way outs how they can do it. Also, our analytics in Ukrainian officials say that Russia still has capabilities even to increase drone production, Shahid drones, and they plan to intensify the strikes, like what happened recently in Dnipropetrovsk region, what happened with the train, our usual commercial passenger train, which was hit. Many passengers were wounded and died. So Russia wants to terrorize our society, to say or to show that the only way out for Ukrainians not to be under the attacks is to accept the Russian peace or Russian world and to join Russia, to do something with the Ukrainian government, to dismiss Zelensky. But it doesn't work like that. It will never work like that, because this terror tactics, it simply doesn't work with Ukrainians. Maybe it worked before with some of the other Russian campaigns. Remember in Chechnya, they destroyed with their carpet bombs Grozny city. So they want, I think, to do the same scenario. For now, Ukraine still has the air defense, and Ukraine will not let it happen.
Yeah, well, I think that my personal idea of this is that, Russia understands they can't win in Ukraine, because obviously Ukrainians are going to stand up to last. So it's like Russia can convince the world, in a sense, that Ukraine can't win this war, but that still won't win them this war, right? Like Russia. So Russia can only win this war if it convinces Ukrainians that we can't win, right? So that's kind of what it's trying to do. But then you said, the US is supporting Ukraine with weapons, and to a degree, yes. But recently, there was also the situation where a lot of the weapons that were agreed upon under the previous administration were diverted to the Middle East, and it was like 2,000 shells or something crazy like that, and those were air defense shells as well, not necessarily Patriot, but still. So it just, there are lots of things happening on behalf of the Trump administration that are not just not helpful, they're quite damaging.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's really sort of this idea that the US is that the US is saying they're a mediator in this conflict. Like, they're not a mediator, not even because they have military allyship to us in a sense, right? But they're not a mediator because it feels like they're genuinely helping Russia with their actions, and they are undermining Ukraine in a lot of their actions.
Well, yeah, Trump's. I would say the same. Like, if Trump is negotiating with Russia, negotiating with Putin, he already really plays not in favor of Ukraine, for Ukraine in this case. And there is also the question what will happen or what happens after those military packages stop. Like, there will be the moment this year, and I don't see the signs that Congress or House is voting for that. Trump said, like yesterday in NATO meeting, that we're gonna see if we're gonna support Ukraine. We're gonna see, but it's for now it will be difficult for Ukraine. About those missiles which were taken as an excuse, Pete Hexes say that they need those to protect their military bases, but we already know the story of this conflict in the Middle East. Everything was played. Basically, Iran report about its revenge attack or retaliation strike, and all of the personnel and airplanes were evacuated. So they didn't use those anti-aircraft systems out there. Maybe it was just excuse to take really those air defense missiles. It's hard to say on my level. But I see the gathering of our allies in attempt to support Ukraine. Like, for example, yesterday, UK Prime Minister announced the new military support with this similar like air defense systems, which were taken from Ukraine. But still the number is smaller. Like, maybe those UK-made systems are even better, but the number is smaller. So I hope we'll see some other compensation from other countries. But the good thing that Europe is not going to abandon Ukraine. And yesterday, during the NATO meeting, they all signed the final document in which Russia was announced as a threat for Euro-Atlantic alliance, and in which they said that they will support Ukraine. By the time Russia is the threat, so in long run, I think Ukraine has all of the tools, but it's better to have them more from the United States. The big question lies for the United States, whether they're going to support Ukraine or not, because without its support, Russia may take more ground in Ukraine. That's the demotivation factor, I would say. For now, they started the Suma operation, which has the same outcome as their Kharkiv operation almost 2 years ago. So they were stopped, and Ukraine is now on counterattack even. We have good news about the imprisonment of the Russian soldiers in Suma direction. So it's not going according to the Russian plan. I mean, on the front lines, and you say that they strike civilians to push Ukrainian society to somehow dismiss the government. That's their plan, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Their idea again is to. I don't think it's about. I don't even think it's about causing as much death, right? It's causing as much death in terms of like demotivating Ukrainian civilians, right? But yeah, as you said, Ukrainian civilians are not Russians. They're not like the people that they've previously dealt with, because every time that something like this happens, the more people die, the more people are injured, the angrier we are, and the more we actually want to fight back. So it's kind of like they're not going to scare us into submission in a sense.
I think in a way they want, it's some sort of the Georgian scenario. Then Russia terrorized Georgia, they occupy part of the territory, and somehow now Georgia has pro-Russian government. So maybe they want to do the same here, but I think it will not work.
They kind of had the same here, right? Like they had Yanukovych, which was a pro-Russian government installed by Russia, and we toppled that down. And I think that, yeah, I think their idea is sort of to exhaust the Ukrainian population so that we say that we need negotiations and we don't want to live like this anymore. And then while that's happening and the trust in Zelensky is undermined, he can swoop in and put in people that are reasonable for him. But we are not stupid, and we know what he's doing and we know why he's doing that. And also, with every dead Ukrainian, we're angrier and angrier. So it's not it's not like,
Yeah.
yeah.
The thing that Russia, like, I think most of the Ukrainians would agree on a proposal which Zelensky proposed now, like ceasefire, current front line, and like war stops. Okay, the same
Mhm.
idea was for the Minsk agreements. Then Putin refused
Yeah,
to communicate after all, even to exchange the soldiers. But Russia
yeah,
doesn't agree on that. It is understandable. So they want Ukraine to give up its territories, and Ukraine will never agree on that. So
yeah, of course.
if Putin agrees on current ceasefire, it would be okay, I guess, for most of population, people, for the government, and for Donald Trump. But Putin doesn't want to do it.
Well, Putin is not going to allow it to happen, and I think Zelensky is saying these proposals because he knows that Putin is not going to allow that to happen, because his goal is not to end the war. His goal is to get as much territory as possible,
Yeah.
because Zelensky also knows that if we freeze the front line where it is right now, at the end of the day, Russia is just going to like wait a little bit and then attack again. So we're kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand, we need a breather, right? But on the other hand, we also know we can't stop, because the second that we stop, we're giving them advantage, not us, right?
Yeah. That's kind of the complicated situation Ukraine is in now. But the good thing that Russia wasn't able to break, like what they wanted to achieve, I think, this
Mhm.
summer, because they started their massive offensive all along the side, the front lines in
Yeah,
the south. They tried to break Ukrainian defense, but it didn't
yeah,
happen.
but they weren't able to.
Yeah, they gained the ground, but Ukraine just leaves position few
Yeah,
kilometers away for the new positions prepared and strikes with the drones. And again, again, again. And Russia simply cannot continue that forever. They try to achieve some sort of the open, straightforward attack, the massive one to break
yeah,
behind the front lines, but it doesn't work.
yeah. I mean, like it's very much it's very much like this situation where they were able to take like a couple of villages, right? And they declared this victory and they were like, yes, we're like,
Hmm.
obviously, hey, go Russia, like we're doing great, right? But it's kind of like, yeah, of course, if you start an offensive, it's really hard to topple it immediately. But then like it took Russia with months and months and months of planning and executing to get like two, three, four villages, and it took Ukraine like what, a week, 2 weeks to get it back. So it's kind of, yeah, it really bothers me that Russia constantly keeps declaring these military gains, and the world keeps constantly like underestimating Ukraine and saying like, oh look, but Russia is gaining territory in Suma now. Ukraine is like definitely, everything is going like downhill for Ukraine. And then the second they say that, Ukraine, I don't know, destroys uh, 12 jets in Russia, or or takes back territory, or has a counteroffensive. So it's like, I think that people constantly write us off before due time.
Yeah,
And
you
it's,
know, that's
yeah.
why our job here is very important, mine and yours, because yeah, there are actually many of the influencers,
Yeah.
Australian American influencers, English speakers on YouTube,
Mhm.
on Twitter, Twitch, and they say those Russian narratives that Ukraine is falling, Ukraine is down. But if we
Yeah.
check out, even if we speak about the territories, if we check out 2 years ago and what is
Yeah.
now, Russia controls now less territories compared to
Yeah,
what
they
it
do.
was 2 years ago. And they
Yeah, they
lost
do.
1 million soldiers,
Yeah.
KIA, or
Yeah.
totally canceled, zeroed by Ukraine. So I don't see like a huge win for Russia for now. That's why they switched the tactics, actually, as you witness yourself living in Kiev. They want to terrorize civilians.
Yeah, but that's like the thing. It's like I don't think they're capable actually of winning in Ukraine, and I think they always know
Hmm.
this. And the only way that they can win is by convincing Ukrainians that Ukraine can't win, and by convincing the world that Ukraine can't win at the same time, right? So the reason why they continue doing this is I think they thought that if they convince the US and the US stops giving us help, we're gonna fold. We didn't fold. So now they're like, well, crap, what do we do now, right? We were kind of banking on this country
Hmm.
just falling to its knees when they're not getting American help, right? So their sort of their whole goal is mostly to defeat the civilian population than it is to defeat the military, because I mean, hey, it's been 3 years, right? It's been 3.5 years that they have been trying to defeat the Ukrainian military. And any expert can say whatever they want, but they haven't moved.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because yeah, they actually wanted to use Donald Trump as their some sort of the super weaponry to not to give Ukraine the military help, but I think now definitely they understand that even without it, Ukraine will continue the resistance. Especially then our other allies are determined still to support Ukraine. And thanks to Ukrainian volunteers as well, those people who collect funds for the drones and other tools which Ukrainian army uses. So without them, it would be really, really hard for Ukraine to withstand, for Ukrainian army, because still they play a very great role. And luckily, our government is changing its policy. I mean, army reforms. They put Magyar, the commander of very famous Magyar Birds unit, as the head of the drone army of Ukraine. So for Russia, they are not even dreaming about it. They're like the best commanders are usually being zeroed, as there was the case with talented drone operators. It happened 1 year ago. Then they were wasted by the Russian military command because they were telling truths about the situation in the Russian army, about poor supplies, about poor command, incompetent command. So in Ukraine, actually now, you can criticize government, you can criticize army actions. Magyar did it many of the times, and he was promoted as the head of the drone army. It's impossible for Russia, and that's why Ukraine actually has more chances, because Ukrainian army, because Russian army, they select loyal people to Putin, to Gerasimov, to whatever, and Ukraine selects those people who can do something on the front lines, who might change something. And the Russians, they envy, and they all like. I monitor Z channels as well on Telegram and on Twitter, and they are in shock, like what happened to Magyar, for example. They're very disappointed with this, and they now continue to write that. Magyar, for example, he's focused now on Russian drone operators to even more than on kabooming the Russian vehicles in the way. So he works against the Russian drone operators now more effectively.
Well, yeah, it's the other thing is like, every time that Ukraine has an operation taking out Russians in a certain region, it's not just like your regular soldier is like the meat of the operation, right? It's always like, hey, the commander of this brigade has been taken down, right? Or like, it's always like high sergeants. So it's never just like random strikes at random people just to sort of like get rid of Russian bodies, because we all know they have a lot of bodies and they're just going to keep coming, right? You have to get rid of the higher position generals, and we do. But then when Russia talks about certain gains or losses in Ukraine, it is just regular soldiers,
Hmm.
you know. So it's these operations are also different because Ukraine has creativity behind it, Ukraine has planning behind it, Ukraine has objectives behind it, which is why it doesn't just stop, offenses right away. It takes its time. While Russia is just sort of like YOLO, we're gonna go ahead and do this and like topple this village and destroy it to the brim, and then put our flag into the ashes of the buildings that stood there. So it's kind of also, arguably, especially when Western analysts talk about like Russia gaining ground, it's a funny word for me because Russia is literally gaining ground. Like,
Yeah,
they're incapable of taking a city without completely demolishing it to the
yeah,
ground.
yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely correct, and It's the thing that on May 9th they put the flags on destroyed Mariupol. Yeah, it is terrible. And they proclaim that they rebuilt Mariupol, but it was a good city even before. And the apartments which they sell, uh, even for locals who lived in those buildings,
Mhm.
locals who decided to stay in Mariupol, they have to pay or
Mhm.
take a loan in a bank for their own
Mhm.
apartment. It is crazy. Like it is crazy what is
Yeah.
happening out there in Russia. If they didn't want to take it, Russia may send some people from Russia to Mariupol who would like to live there. Not
Well,
many people would like to do it, but some
I
people
mean,
went.
there is also this thing where, like, the reason why
Hmm.
Russians sort of don't care to win and why they don't have this, like, what they don't care to fight or like do something substantial, right? Is because I think they don't have a sense of belonging to land. Because, right, like you live in Vladivostok and then there is a new apartment complex in Mariupol. And you're
Hmm.
like, yeah, sure, I'm going there. This is Russian land, right? Like if
Yeah, it's warmer.
they told you tomorrow that like Moldova was Russian or Georgia was Russian or Lithuania was Russian, they would pick up all of their stuff and move. And they wouldn't care about the fact that their entire like family generations lived in Vladivostok. They literally don't care. And also, I think that they don't have that. They don't have these like footings where like, oh, you have your grandma and great grandma and like your family's history in Vladivostok, because they constantly do this. They invade land, they throw some Russians to that land. They I don't know, they don't like you, they throw you into a gulag in Siberia. You did something wrong, they take you and your family and send you somewhere else. So it's sort of like um they're these traveling kind of, they're this traveling nation. And with Mariupol particularly, yeah, they're rebuilding it and selling and giving the apartments to Russians while Ukrainians that went through bombings have nowhere to live,
Yeah,
you know. And then the other thing is they're rebu- they're rebuilding it. Okay, well, there was nothing to rebuild. There was a whole city that was completely functional, that was not just like there, it was prospering in the past like 8
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Mariupol has become really up and coming. It was beautiful, it was European, there were new things opening all the time. It was possibly had some of the best infrastructure and roads and stuff like that in Ukraine because it was very fast growing. So it's
Yeah.
like there was nothing to rebuild. It's kind of like, if I if I go to like your house and I break your TV and then I put it back together and I'm like, but I did this cool thing for you. It's like I wouldn't have to do it for you if I didn't broke your TV in the first place.
Yeah, and in Mariupol in particular, the Azovstal is destroyed, so the city was based on this factory, huge factory, and it is impossible to rebuild Azovstal. So economically, it's not profitable to have that city any longer. Actually, to rebuild it in the same size, in the same scale. So
Well, it was
it's like a propaganda mostly from Russia.
yeah, exactly. And it's like it's not they're trying to turn it into like a resort town, which to be fair,
Hmm.
like they're so unimaginative because every time that they see a city on the water, they're like beach resort, right? It's
Hmm.
like, this isn't a beach resort. It was a massive industrial town with a lot of
Hmm.
production happening. You ruined all of this production, and now you have these empty plots of metal and chemicals and like radiation basically from the amount of missiles that you've like thrown into this ground. You can't build anything there. You have to
Hmm.
wait years and years and years until you can actually clean up the mess that you've created. And now you have these like unoccupied massive plots of land. Sure, you can get a few tourists to come here and pay some money for what, for a beach that's mined that has like
Yeah.
mines. It's not feasible. It's so not feasible.
Yeah, I agree. And for Crimea, I'm from Crimea myself, from Sevastopol, originally was living there. I may confirm that Russians are coming to Crimea, especially from Northern Caucasus,
Hmm.
and they're massive there. So, as you say, they don't have their own like land culture.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it depends, like, but mostly, yeah, I agree. If they have something new, if they see okay, Crimea, it is a good place because it's warmer than in
Yeah.
Siberia. Gonna go there.
Yeah.
and they're now the problem with many of the Russians. And I'm sure, like, some people, say that, oh, Ukraine cannot return Crimea, Ukraine cannot return the borders. I wouldn't believe that at this point. I wouldn't like trust that opinion. Yeah,
Yeah.
it may return, it may not return. But 2 years ago, there was the military coup in Russia. Prigozhin went to Moscow. He turned somehow, but we never know what might happen. Like, our
Yeah.
world is totally unpredictable. No one predicted the war in Iran like a month or two ago. Yeah, like there were some of the talks, that's it. But United
Yeah.
States bombing those nuclear infrastructure, no one would dare to think about it. So
Yeah.
we live in a really unpredicted world. So I wouldn't say that Ukraine is absolutely cannot return Crimea. We'll see. Maybe
Yeah.
with Putin, it's complicated to do it in a military way. Zelensky say that, yeah, okay, with military action we are unable to do it, but what is gonna be then Putin's regime collapses?
Yeah.
Because Putin is not a young guy.
Yeah.
Eventually he will pass away, and maybe they're gonna put all of the dogs on Putin. I mean, Russians themselves. Maybe this Russian oligarchy, they would like to restore their assets in European Union, in United States. They would like to
Yeah.
go to their villas. Maybe they will exchange like Ukraine for lowering the sanctions or canceling the sanctions just to live their normal life before Putin. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, there are lots of pressure points. I did, it's interesting because I did talk to someone who's a former Ukrainian like military general
Hmm.
recently, and they said that like this idea that this war has to end in diplomacy is so wrong, and it's Russian propaganda because this war
Hmm.
will only end on the battlefield and it will only end militarily, and
Hmm.
it's only like it's only beneficial for Russia to convince people that it's a diplomatic resolution because there is no diplomatic resolution, right? And I think we don't know because, first of all, Ukraine is advancing our military technology faster than anyone ever has. In the and it's a fact, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, in 2 years' time, we might have some weapon that actually can return Crimea in a sense of like, smoking Russians out of there, quite literally. Also, we do know that once Crimea has no help from Ukraine, usually Russians don't know what to do with it because we do have that situation from the 1950s when Ukraine actually was assigned Crimea because Russians moved from Vladivostok and didn't know how to farm there, didn't know how to like
Hmm.
get water in there, and everything was just dying. And the reason why Ukraine uh, like received Crimea to begin with is because Russians weren't able to maintain it at all. And
Hmm.
Ukrainians already had like trade relationships with Crimean Tatars and an actual relationship with Crimean Tatars. So I think that our job is to continue educating people in a sense of what Russian propaganda is and how carefully it's crafted. When like this diplomacy route is in fact Russian propaganda because there is no diplomacy when it comes to Russia.
Yeah, but Ukraine, like for now, Ukraine is unable. Like, let's be honest,
Oh
Ukraine
yeah,
for
right
now
now
is
for
is
sure.
unable, and Zelensky say that, yeah, from a military perspective. But in the future, like, we'll see. As you
Yeah.
say, I'm not sure if there will be like a super weaponry out there, but I mostly rely on some black swan to appear in Russia, that Russia will be itself like formatted. I think it's the destiny which they cannot avoid. It's gonna be like Soviet Union, and Ukraine will be like Afghanistan as it was for the Soviet Union. Fortunately,
Mm.
that war continued like for 10 years, and it was one of the causes for the Soviet Union collapse. I think it could be the same for Russia.
Well, I mean,
The
hey,
same.
we're 2014, 2025. We're on our 11th year, so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
12
yeah,
years
yeah,
is the
yeah,
charm.
yeah, yeah. You're right. Yeah, the war actually started in
Yeah,
2014.
2014.
The problem that we have this incompetent leadership now in USA. It's sad actually that
Yeah.
and Ukraine was lucky with the previous administration because despite like the previous administration, they believe in some of the values of democracy, but the current administration they believe in the law of force, and that's a bad thing. But we'll
Well,
see.
The previous administration had a lot of fear, but they believed in international law and they
Mm-hmm.
believed in
Mm-hmm.
morals, right? This administration doesn't even believe in force. It believes in empires. It
Yeah.
believes that the US has to dictate to Europe what to do. Russia has to dictate to all of the Russian satellites what to do. China has to dictate what to do in Asia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, who is like more powerful, like the power of
Yeah, yeah.
force?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
I mean. Mm-hmm.
They believe in empires.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have any conclusive statements to share?
Yeah, I would like to say that despite what is happening, like to stay positive and continue support Ukraine in the way you can, guys. Put the like to those videos pro Ukrainians, help Ukrainian volunteers, just support Ukraine in many of the ways, and because with your support, Ukraine continue to exist, and we are sure about our victory still. Like it is no any way that Russia occupies Ukraine. I personally cannot imagine it happening, in, despite what Russia is doing, and we'll see in the future how really world might change. I think that what the bad things are now happening also in USA, they're temporary, and everything will be good. Believe in Ukraine, believe in yourself.
It's a very inspirational one.
Yeah,
I will try to take this advice from you as well and follow it.
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming here today. It's as always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope
Thank
that
you,
we
Yula.
do this soon again.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Yula.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. As always, for me, it was very interesting and very productive. And if it was the same for you, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications. Also, please give it a like and send it to a friend. And of course, leave me your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism in the comments below so we can chat about it. Till next time.